Hi everyone, my name is Samantha, and I am here today to talk to you about Furman versus Georgia. So it first came about when everyone decided that the death penalty was unconstitutional. Why was it unconstitutional? Because the Eighth Amendment decides that in our Constitution it wanted to state that we will not allow cruel and unusual punishment in America, which is pretty sound in reason if you ask me, because cruel and unusual punishment for things that they didn't commit or that they didn't actually deserve death, let's say, should be a ban on. So in 1972, justices came together with the Supreme Court, and they decided to rule on the issue of the death penalty, whether it is actually going to be constitutional or not constitutional. It was a split decision. It was a 5-4 decision, as all of the justices decided that they had different views on it, and they wanted to impose different ways of why it was constitutional or why it was not constitutional. There was some racial discrimination as the issue for the death penalty that had the reason why it was unconstitutional. Some of the reasons why the justices decided the different things that they did was Justice Brennan and Marshall believed that it was cruel and unusual, but Justice Brennan argued that it violated the concept of human dignity, whereas Justice Marshall argued that it served legitimate penal purpose, which means that there's no reason to put someone to death for any crime. So they decided against it. 3 other justices concluded that it was unconstitutional because of the 8th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. As I went over the 8th Amendment, which puts a ban on cruel and unusual punishment, and the 14th Amendment, which requires the equal protection under the law for everyone, no matter what you've done, which is the 14th Amendment. Justice Douglas stated in the book, which is The Color of Justice, this one, he stated that the procedures in administering the death penalty were pregnant with discrimination, meaning that there's so much discrimination going on in this world. If they wanted to make it constitutional, they would have to take out any discrimination in it, which is nearly impossible, so he decided against it. Justice Stewart stated that it was so warrantly and freakishly imposed that it shouldn't be constitutional at all, because there's no way that there can be any unbiased in a jury when you have a jury together that is not trained to do this. Justice White found that it has no meaningful basis for distinguishing the few cases in which imposed so many cases, and in so many cases it wasn't imposed. So there was no real regulation of how they were going to impose it or how they weren't going to impose it. With the result of all of this, it was decided that it was unconstitutional against federal law. There's 39 states that did abide by this and abolish the death penalty, but there are some states that decided they still needed the death penalty, and they were going to remediate it so that it was unbiased and that it was well thought out before someone was given the death penalty. Some states decided that it was going to go through the way of minimum mandatory laws, where if someone committed a crime as in first-degree murder, they were going to automatically get the death penalty, which would be great if it wasn't in such a low area, a low-income area, or if it was regulated all across the board, but it wasn't. And then there were other laws that wanted to go the route of guided discrimination, which personally I believe is the best way that you can go about it, because having a longer and tougher trial and being able to really think about it and having more trained people have eyes on whether someone deserved the death penalty or not is the way it should be brought about. Thank you for listening to me about Furman and Georgia, and I hope you guys have a wonderful afternoon.